Hey, fourth graders, welcome back to Math Time. Today we'll be looking at two different types of lines. The first one is parallel lines, and the second one is perpendicular lines. So we'll start with parallel lines. Now, the very cool thing that I really like about parallel lines is that the definition of parallel is literally in the word parallel. If we look at these two L's in the word parallel, you'll notice that both of the lowercase L's, when written like this, they are side by side. If I were to take this top L or this L right here and I were to extend the top of it up and take this L and extend the top of it up, they would never ever touch each other. Similarly, if I were to take them and both drag them down, they would never ever touch each other. Their paths would never cross. Okay, now that's what parallel lines are. If I have a set of lines, let's look at these two right here. If I have these set of lines, I notice that they are right next to each other. They aren't touching each other. Their paths aren't crossing. So right now they look like they're parallel. If I were to take another marker or pencil and I were to extend both of the lines up or both of the lines down, their paths would also never, ever, ever touch each other. They would never cross paths. That's because they are parallel. Similarly, with these two other sets of lines here, they are parallel because they are never, ever, ever going to cross paths with each other. So that's parallel lines. Now, if we look at perpendicular lines, when you think of perpendicular lines, I want you to think of right angles. Remember, our right angles are where we can take a sticky note and we can fit it right in the corner, and the corner is going to line up perfectly with the two rays that make up our right angle. Now, all three of these sets of lines that I have here are perpendicular. Wherever you have two lines that cross each other's paths and make a right angle, we call those perpendicular lines. So I have this this line, and this line. They are both intersecting each other, and they're intersecting each other at the exact point where they are making, actually, I have two of them labeled here, but they are making four right angles. And because they are making at least one right angle, we call that a perpendicular line. If we look right here, I have two lines that are kind of intersecting each other. This ray is kind of coming out of this line right here, but because the ray is coming out of the line at an exact right angle there, we have two right angles, we would consider both of these lines perpendicular from each other. And down here, you'll notice I have a right angle. I have two rays that are coming out, meeting at the vertex there. They do create a right angle when they both meet each other at the vertex. And they don't have to be intersecting. They just have to at least touch each other. Okay? And since a right angle is made, we call these parallel lines. Now let's look at a bunch of different examples here where I want you to try to figure out, is it parallel? Is it perpendicular, or is it neither parallel or perpendicular? Okay? Let's start over here. I have these two lines right here. You notice that they are intersecting, so I know I can already take out the fact that they are not parallel, okay? Or I'm going to say that they are not parallel. I know that because I know that all parallel lines never, ever, ever intersect or come in contact or touch each other. They social distance themselves very, very well, okay? They stay at least a solid distance away, and they never ever touch each other. So I know that these two lines here are not parallel, but are they perpendicular? The way to test to see if these two lines here are perpendicular is to see if they make right angles. Well, I know if I were to take a sticky note, this line right here, or this angle here, looks obtuse. Same with this one over here, and these two angles down, up and down here, they look to be acute. All right, so I'm going to say that since these lines touch each other, and since there's no right angle made, I'm going to say that both of these lines here are neither parallel or perpendicular. If we look at the second one here, notice that they again are coming in contact with each other. So I'm going to cancel out parallel. I know they're not parallel. If they both make at least one right angle, then we'll know that they'll be perpendicular. Well, I see this nice angle right here. I bet you if I put a sticky note right in the corner there, that would make a 90-degree angle. and we would have a right angle, which would make these two lines here perpendicular. All right, so right now we have neither. We have perpendicular. Let's take a look right here. Well, neither of these lines here are touching, so maybe they're parallel. Since they're not touching, I know that they're not perpendicular, because perpendicular lines at least need to touch each other along with making that right angle. But if I were to take this line here and I were to continue it up, and if I were to take this other line here and I were to take it across, I would notice that both of my lines right about here, they would come in contact with each other. Now, just because they're not touching each other here doesn't mean that any other place they might come in contact with each other, okay? As if the lines come in contact with each other at any single point, they are no longer parallel, okay? So since these two lines would come in contact with each other right up here, I'm going to say that these two lines here are not parallel or perpendicular. And it's kind of similarly right here with this fourth example here. We have this line right here and the other line going kind of sideways, angled up here. They're not touching each other, so I know that they're not perpendicular. But are they parallel? Well, if I take this line and I just continue it straight up, it's going to easily run right into my top line there. So I know that these two lines here are not perpendicular or parallel. It would be important to check to see if they would come in contact with each other at a 90-degree angle at a perpendicular line. But just because I see that the angle of this line up here, I know that it's not going to make a 90-degree angle. If you're not sure, what you could do is you just trace this line all the way up, and when it intersects with the top line here, if it makes a 90-degree angle, then you have perpendicular. But in this case, we do not have perpendicular. Over here, I have two lines. They're not touching each other. They're kind of going at the same direction here. If I were to take both of these lines and I were to trace them all the way up, trace them all the way down, I would know that they would never touch each other, which would make these last set of lines here parallel. Well, you guys have some questions that you guys will be working on. I'll have you guys draw some parallel lines and also identify parallel versus non-parallel and perpendicular, non-perpendicular lines. Let me know if you have any questions, and as always, wash your hands.